The silence that shattered me. It was 3:17 a.m. Sarah's eyes blinked open, not from a dream, not from a noise, just a silent, aching pull in her soul that wouldn't let her sleep. She turned over to look at the clock and sighed. Another sleepless night. The last few months had felt like one long prayer, unanswered. Her husband had been laid off, bills were stacking up, her mother was sick, and her faith, the one thing that had always grounded her, now felt like it had packed its bags and walked away. She had begged God. She had pleaded. She had cried herself to sleep more times than she could count. She had fasted, read her Bible, even joined an early morning prayer call for 40 days. But the heavens remained still. No sign, no whisper, no miracle, just silence. And in that silence, a dangerous thought began to creep in. Maybe he's not listening. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe God doesn't care. She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back like waves crashing against a weary shore. The faith of yesterday. Sarah hadn't always felt this way. She was the girl who used to jump up during worship, hands raised high, tears running down her cheeks. She believed God moved mountains. She had stories, testimonies of healing, provision, divine intervention. There was a time when just a whisper of prayer felt like it moved heaven. But now, her prayers hit the ceiling and fell back like shattered glass. She used to encourage others, hold on, God is working. But now she couldn't even convince herself. She tried to keep up appearances, Sunday service, Bible study, smiles. But inside she was drowning, and no one could hear her scream. A whisper in the dark. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, Sarah sat on the floor in her living room with the lights off. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she whispered, God, where are you? Why are you silent? I don't need everything fixed. I just need to know you're still here. Still nothing. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. Then something unexpected happened. Not a voice, not a vision, but a memory. A small, almost forgotten memory from when she was 5 years old. Her father had taken her to a swimming pool. She was afraid to jump in. He had said, jump, I'm right here. I won't let you drown. She had jumped, eyes shut, arms out, and sure enough, he caught her. He didn't catch her immediately, though. For a moment, she had been underwater, flailing. But he was there. He had never left. He just waited, long enough for her to learn that she could trust him. That memory hit her like a bolt of lightning. Was that what God was doing? Was he quiet? Not because he was absent, but because he was teaching her to trust deeper? Lessons in silence. The next morning, Sarah pulled out her journal and wrote in big, bold letters. When God is silent, it doesn't mean he's absent. She began to search the scriptures not just for answers, but for stories of silence. She found Job, a man who lost everything and sat in silence while the heavens watched. She found David, crying out, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? She found Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, asking the Father for another way, receiving silence in return. And then she saw it. Silence is not punishment. Silence is not rejection. Sometimes, silence is preparation. The God who waits. As days turned into weeks, something began to shift in Sarah. Not her circumstances, but her heart. She started to see that silence wasn't empty. It was full of invisible work, full of unseen progress, full of purpose. She started waking up earlier, not to plead with God, but just to sit with him. In the quiet, she began to sense his presence again, not in dramatic ways, but in stillness. A sunrise that painted hope, a verse that spoke peace, a stranger's smile that felt divine. One morning, she felt a gentle stirring in her heart. I never left. I was just waiting for you to see me in the silence. Tears welled up in her eyes. Maybe this silence wasn't a wall. Maybe it was a doorway. The hidden work. It was a Thursday afternoon when Sarah got a call from the hospital. Her mother, who had been battling a long illness, had stabilized. In fact, the doctors were amazed at how she was recovering, faster than expected. One even called it unexplainable. Sarah smiled. She didn't shout. She didn't fall to her knees in dramatic praise. She just smiled, because she understood something now. God had been working, not just in her mother's body, but in her heart. In the silence, he had rearranged her soul, pulled weeds of doubt, planted seeds of maturity, and taught her to listen differently. The silence had not been empty. It had been pregnant, full of purpose. The test of trust. One evening, Sarah walked to the edge of the lake near her home. The wind was soft, and the water mirrored the sky above, endless and still. She thought about everything she had been through, the fear, the waiting, the silence. Then she whispered aloud, "Lord, even when I don't hear you, I will trust you." It was not a declaration made from comfort, but from the trenches of pain. And that's what made it real. Because faith that only exists when things go well is not faith, it's convenience. But faith that holds on in silence, that's trust. That's intimacy. That's what grows roots deep enough to weather any storm. What the silence really meant. So what did the silence really mean? Looking back, Sarah saw clearly now. It meant God trusted her with a test that would refine her, not destroy her. It meant he was working, but in ways she couldn't see. It meant he was drawing her deeper, inviting her to move beyond feelings into true faith. It meant he loved her enough not to hand her easy answers, but to grow her through the struggle. And more than anything, it meant she wasn't alone, even when she felt like it. Speaking to the silent ones. Months later, Sarah was invited to speak at her church's women's retreat. The theme? What to do when God is silent. She smiled when she saw the flyer. She stood before a room full of women, some smiling, some tearful, some holding on by a thread, and told her story. Not the polished Sunday school version, but the real one. The pain, the prayers that went unanswered, the dark nights of the soul, and the turning point when she realized God's silence wasn't rejection, but refinement. Women wept, not because she had the answers, but because she made them feel seen. One woman said afterward, "I thought I was the only one who felt like God forgot me. But now I see. Maybe he's just working in the quiet." When silence speaks. Years later, Sarah would still have moments of silence. Life didn't become perfect. There were still prayers that took time. But she no longer feared silence. Because now she knew silence speaks. It says, "Wait, I'm preparing something better. Be still. I'm shaping you. Trust me, even when you don't feel me." Sarah started writing devotionals and sending them out every week. She called her series, "When God is Silent, Letters from the Waiting Room." She would write lines like, "The teacher is always silent during the test. Sometimes God no is really a not yet. You're not being ignored. You're being held." The symphony of stillness. One day, while walking through a forest trail during a weekend getaway, Sarah sat down on a log and closed her eyes. There was no music, no sermon, no urgent prayer, just the wind, the trees, the silence. And in that stillness, she heard what she now recognized so easily. Peace. Because silence, when met with trust, becomes a symphony, a song only the soul can hear. She opened her eyes and said with a soft smile, "I hear you, Lord. Even in your silence, I hear you." This is what it really means. If you've ever felt like God was silent, this story is for you. It doesn't mean you've been abandoned. It doesn't mean your faith is broken. It doesn't mean God is angry with you or ignoring you. Here's what it really means. He is near, just quiet. He's letting your roots grow deeper. He's preparing the answer before he reveals it. He's teaching you to trust without evidence. He's refining your soul in the quiet places. God's silence is often the space between the seed and the harvest. A space where faith is tested, where character is built, where transformation happens. If you're in that season now, take heart. Because one day, like Sarah, you'll look back and say, "Now I understand the silence." It wasn't punishment. It was preparation. The night may be long, but the sun will rise. The silence may feel heavy, but it's not forever. God is not gone. He's simply working in ways deeper than sound. Hold on. Trust him. Lean into the silence. Because when the time is right, God speaks again. And when he does, everything changes.